For it's kind of a very special, awesome Nigla Hasidis mashed up, beautiful thing. It starts a little bit out of the ordinary because, as you noted, it's a Chai Sarah Sicha. We're not in Parshas Chai Sarah, but it's really a Chanukah Sicha. Just that Rebbe connected it with the Parsha of Chai Sarah for reasons that you'll soon see. But we'll begin. Ready? So page 197. So he says like this: Parshas Chai Sarah Nikras is this parsha is read sometimes, Pamim Rabos, many times, like this Shabbos, the Shabbos of Vorchem Chodesh Kislev, right, which blesses the month of Kislev. As it's known, Yesh Kesher bin Parshus HaShavua lebein Zman Kriyasan. So this is something as we bring it down all the time. The Rebbe quotes this constantly for this Shalah, that there is a connection between the parshas that you read and the time in which they're read. Right, so that's not necessarily muvan me'ilav, as they say. It's not necessarily self-understood, because the connection of the Torah portions is not obviously, having any symbolism of the holidays that are going on, right? Like, it's not like you're reading about Pesach when it's Pesach or anything like that. But nonetheless, whatever you happen to be reading in the Torah when it's Pesach, it's always going to be the same parshas every year. And what he's saying is, and the Shalah, Shnei Luchos HaBris, pointed out that all the holidays in the year, all the occurrences of the day are basically hinted to inside of those parshas that you read at that time. So, for example, Chanuka would be fully invested into parshas Miketz. Right now, like we're reading, even though Miketz is not particularly speaking about anything to do with Chanuka, and Chanuka actually was set up and established after the Torah was finished, nonetheless, all the holidays, even rabbinic holidays, they're hinted to and found inside of the parshas that Moshe's Torah dictates. Anyway, in that case, it's move on. It's understood. So this is still shaykh for us, because we're saying that in this parsha, it's hinted to the Inyan of Chodesh Kislev, in particular Chanukah, as we're going to soon see. What's unique about every Chodesh, which makes it unique from every other month, is generally connected to those special days, Chagim v'kadome, the holidays and so forth, Shel Chodesh Zeh. In other words, what signifies and designates a month to be sort of, you can understand its unique quality. You have to look at the holidays or the special days in that month. Hamashpiim al chodesh kulo, and those holidays in a particular month, they have an effect on the whole month. For example, this is seen openly when it comes to the month of Adar. It says she'achodesh kulo ne'afach lechodesh al simcha v'yom tov ekev yimei hapurim shabo. Right? When you get to Adar, we already say that when Adar begins, b'shenichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. As soon as Adar begins, you should increase in joy. Why? Because Purim is in that month. Okay, but Purim is on the 14th of the month. Yes, but that's the point he's trying to make. The inyanim of a particular month have an effect on the entire month, so much so that even the halacha states that you should start adding in joy already from the beginning of the month, because Purim has an effect on the entirety of the month. This is the same is true basically regarding Chanukah, right? Mikach muvan shemashmus chodesh Kislev kashur Chanukah. The whole month of Kislev, right? It's a Chanukah month, not just Chanukah happens in the end of the month, right? The whole month becomes a Chanukah month. We can learn that from the concept of Adar, and in fact, you can learn about every month. Shavuos, right, changes the whole month of Sivan to a Shavuos-dika month, right? In general, this is how it goes.
Rabbi, is this italicized when it's this font?
That is italicized.
Okay, it's being stressed.
Okay. So we see that Kislev is a Chanukah month, not just a Chanukah is in the month. That which begins on the 25th of Kislev, Motzim Remez the Nes Chanukah Parshas Chai Sarah. And therefore, already not only can you find hints to Chanukah in Parshas Miketz, right, and Parshas Vayeshev, but all the way back to what the parsha that blessed the month of Kislev, which was Parshas Chai Sarah. He wants to say there's already indications of Chanukah hanging out, and the whole Kislev, and particularly Chanukah, hanging out in already Parshas Chai Sarah, which you wouldn't necessarily connect it to, but because of this principle, the whole concept of Chai Sarah was Shabbos Vorchem Kislev, right? It was a while back. Right, but it's the Shabbos which blesses the month of Kislev, and therefore the whole month of Kislev is in it, including the Inyanim of Kislev, which is Chanukah. Okay, So this would have been a lot more satisfying if we read this on Chai Sarah. But the point is not that it just that point you can make broadly throughout the Torah. Yimei Chanukah nikvu lezecher nes pach Hashem. All right, let's get to the meat and potatoes here. So it says the days of Chanukah were established as a remembrance for the miracle of the jar of oil. Lo matzu el pach echad shel shemen. Right, the Gemara states Shabbos that when the Chashmonaim basically overtook their enemies, they went and looked into the temple and they only found one jar of oil. It only had enough oil in it to last 1 day's worth of lighting the menorah. It says in the Gemara, there's all a quote, a miracle happened to it, and they lived for 8 days. Chanukah. So what does that have to do with Sarah? A miracle very similar to this miracle of Chanukah we find by Sarah and Rivka. Who knows where?
The bread.
What's that?
Was it the bread?
It was not the bread. It was a nace just like this one.
The bird.
Shabbat candles?
Shabbos candles. Kafisha Omrim Chazal. The pasuk, right? The pasuk in that it says over there. This is in what's that?
In Shabbos. Oh.
No, it's in the Chumash, right? It says V'yavia Yitzchak ha'oila Sara imo. So the pasuk is talking about when Yitzchak finally brings Rivka home to the tent. And it says, the simple reading would be, and Yitzchak brought Rivka to the tent of his mother Sarah. But Rashi points out that you should break up the pasuk in a slightly different way, which reads what? Yitzchak brought her to the tent, and it was Sarah, his mother. You remember that? You remember reading that in the Chitas? In other words, you could say this: the tent of Sarah, his mother. Or you could say he brought her to the tent, period, and behold, it was Sarah, his mother. It's kind of a weird thing to think about his wife, but in certain ways, it was reminiscent of Sarah, his mother. In what ways was it reminiscent?
The candles?
The candles. Sorry,
I don't remember the incident of the candles. What's the incident of the candles between
You'll see. Shenera Shabbos Shenhadliku. Hayadolek milele Shabbos va'ad leili Shabbos. And why did he suddenly say it's my mother? Not God forbid that it was his mother, his wife, but properties that only his mother was righteous enough to bring into the tent suddenly returned to the tent when he brought Rivka there. And one of those things was, you're right about the bread, but he mentions here what's nogea to Chanukah. He says that the Shabbos candles would light from Leil Shabbos to Leil Shabbos. In other words, they would light and it wasn't because they had so much oil for a week, right? They lit the Chanukah candles, and they didn't go out until mamash it was time to light them again next week, and they would put them out and relight them, right? So it was mamash a Chanukah miracle, exactly the same type of Chanukah miracle, and it was going on in the tent of Yitzchak and Rivka.
What was the explanation for that phenomenon then?
Miracle.
But for what derived purpose?
Just because of their holiness, like Hashem touched them with miraculous stuff.
So they would be reinforced that this was a miraculous union.
I don't know if it's a miraculous union, just the forefathers, Hashem, they were like surrounded by miracles. It's a good question why he made that miracle. But the point is that they were just righteous enough to experience Hashem's miracles. Right? I mean, why? I guess whenever you have a miracle, it's some kind of a bestowing of Hashem's belovedness on you. Why did Hashem make the miracle in the days of Chanukah? I guess you could say there was a utilitarian purpose that they needed to get the pure oil, but in truth, I don't think Hashem's just like making a miracle strictly for utilitarian purposes. It's in order to show His love. For example, the splitting of the sea. You might say, well, they needed to cross the river. Like you said, no, actually, we know that they didn't even cross it. Hashem brought them back on the same side they started on. It wasn't in order to get to the other side of the road. It was to show a belovedness. So the same thing is true, I guess, in all miracles. Hashem's going to break the order of nature in order to show His love to His people. And in this case, it was the Avos. They were just sort of surrounded by miracles. Their whole life was just beloved to Hashem. Limrozos, you guys are on page 198 with me there, yeah? Limrozos, move on, despite this fact, however, you make a very good point, Yaakov, not realizing it per se, that Nes Chanukah yesh chidush al pnei nes shel ner Sarah v'Rivka. We have to say that the miracle of Chanukah has something over and above this seemingly identical miracle of Sarah and Rivka, right? Umiyuchad kasher nes Chanukah garam lekaviyas yom tov miyuchad, and specifically because the miracle of Chanukah created and caused a fixed and permanent Yom Tov that like never went away. In other words, why don't we have one day on the calendar that is a remembrance for the miracle of Sarah and Rivka's candle, right? It didn't make it into the calendar. So the fact is, as much as it was definitely a miracle and we record it and we talk about it, we don't celebrate it. And so we must say that the Chanukah miracle, which looks identical, must have something going for it that theirs did not, to the point that we fix it on the calendar and celebrate it. But it has like something unique. He says, by the way, he doesn't want to knock Sarah and Rivka out of the picture here. So he says, you could look at it the other way. In footnote number 12. You could say, on the other hand, you could say that they had even something greater in their miracle, because it was every week and every year, and in the merits of one individual, not like a whole nation.
Would it continue that miracle?
Yeah, they had it every week, every year. They were all their lives. Right? That was just how they rolled.
How did the candles go out for them to light it again?
They put them out.
Really?
They have a mitzvah to light.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never ending candles.
Save on electricity costs.
Yeah.
All right. So the point is, besides that footnote where he's sort of just saying about the praises of Sarah and Rivka, in a simple way, there's something lacking, or there's something extra, I guess you could say in the positive sense, in the Chanukah, that it was fixed for a Yom Tov, whereas theirs was not. What did it have that theirs did not? Dachuk lomar, it's very forced to say, it's not a good answer. Shamai liyechidahi, that the singular quality that it had, right, that from this jar of oil of the Chanukah, asher lo haya lubo el adlik yom echad, it only had enough to light one day. Hidiku shmona yamim, is that it lit for 8 days. Bo asher neros sarav rivka dalkun b'neis rak shiva yamim. Right, you could say that the Shabbos candle only lit for 7 days. And so the Chanukah candle lit for 8 days. It was like, 8 days of a miracle. Like, let's make a holiday out of it. He says that's a pretty kind of a bad answer. It's a difference you could point to, but it's not like really seemingly significant enough to make like such a completely different category out of the miracle of Chanukah versus theirs. Because it's not a different in the actual quality of the miracle. It's just a quantity of the miracle, and that's not significant enough to be a big enough difference.
What's Mahusi?
Mahusi is qualitative, and kamusi is quantitative, right? So what he's saying is, seemingly it was the same quality, just a little bit more quantity. It's not enough to make a holiday out of it. If it is, we should have made a holiday the first time.
Right.
Okay, base. Neis Chanukah kamos o ekos. Now we spun the conversation into quality and quantity conversation. Let's look at the whole conversation about Chanukah in those terms. Neis Chanukah musbar v'chlalus shtei drachim. You can explain Chanukah in general in 2 different ways. 1 and 2. Aleph, kamus hashemin gadla b'neis. We're now going to discuss what is brought in poskim, the actual description of the miracle. What took place exactly, how the miracle was constructed by Hashem. So one is that what's called kamus hashemin gadla b'neis, that the amount of oil was multiplied, and that was the miracle, right? There was more and more oil than the nature would dictate. That's one way of seeing this miracle. So that there would be enough oil for all 8 days. In other words, that the oil like sort of magically increased to make it so that even though there was one amount of oil, suddenly there was more amount of oil. Either in such a way that the jug remained every day, right? Even after it was filled, malok b'techila, that even after like it burned down, it remained every day full as it started.
The receptacle on the menorah.
Yeah. Oh, Kevin Shakol Yom Matzu Neros Meleim Shemen Geshtei Deus Amuvaz Bebeis Yosef. Or since they came back and they saw the in other words, no, the pach. I'm sorry, no, you're right. To stop me there, the pach is the thing that they pour from, right? So they said, how did the oil magically increase? In that itself, there's two ways of looking at it.
Yes.
One was that the jar they were pouring from remained full as it started, even after they filled up all the candles on the candelabra.
So it stayed full.
The jar stayed full, or the actual they saw that the jars on the candles were full every day when they came back in after they lit it. So it's basically the same concept, just two different slight variations. That there was more and more oil. Either the oil was magically increased from the jar they poured it from, or that jar maybe was emptied out the first time, but every time they came in, even though the oil went down, it was filled back up in the candelabra when
But it
they
necessitates it in sequence, right? The next day they come in and see that the next receptacle for that day had filled with oil, right? Because you're saying
No.
they didn't put all 8.
No, they did. There was
all
no 8,
6.
7. This is a different thing.
7, yeah.
No, it was
6
not a
and-
Hanukkah type of lighting.
Right.
They lit the whole menorah every day, like all 7 branches every day.
Right.
Right. It wasn't that they increased every day.
I see.
We do that in Hanukkah. They didn't do that. So they filled it all 7, and then the next day, either the 7 were empty, but lo and behold, there was plenty more oil in the original jar. Or they came back and all 7 were full again. So either way, it's more oil than than there should have been. The second way of looking at it is Eichus Hashem and Hishtana. It was not the amount of oil that changed, but the quality of oil that changed. You never thought so much about the Hanukkah miracle. What actually took place there, right? And it's actually machlokes in the post-game, and people are discussing this throughout the ages, what took place. And it actually has very deep significance once you know the truth of that, like what these ramifications are, right? So there's an opinion that says that the quality of the oil changed, meaning Kamus Hashem hamaspika ba'ofen tivi liyom echad bilvad, meaning there was only an amount of oil that was enough naturally for only one day. Dalka shmoniyim, but that amount that was only enough for one day, it wound up burning for 8 days. Kol yom kalsa shminis min Hashem and shebepach. And how would that work? Because every day only 1/8 of the oil burned. So it was like super strong oil that Hashem changed the quality of the oil to be like a different composition that burned slower. So the same oil, it was so in that capacity there was no extra oil. It was just they found one jar and they used one jar. That was the whole story. It's just that the jar took 8 days to burn instead of one, right?
7, I thought. Okay. Oh,
No,
never mind.
8 days.
It burned for 8
Yeah.
days, but it was okay.
There was 7 candles a day.
Yeah, right.
But they burned for 8 days. Kafisha Omer Beis Yosef, and this is what the Beis Yosef says. Our very own Beis Yosef, buried here in Sfas. Shechalku as Hashemen shebepach l'shmona, right? And he actually brings this opinion, right, that they divided the oil into 8 parts. B'chol yom milu b'menorah chelek echad bilvad, and every day they only used one part. It's a full-blown opinion in the Shulchan Aruch. O kafisha masbid hapari chadash. Or there's another way of explaining this concept that the oil did not increase, but the miracle happened anyway, as explained in the Pri Chadash. Should be Yom Harishon Milu es Kol Hashem Benora B'Chol Laila Dalku Rak Shminis Hashem. So again, there's two ways of looking at this. Either l'chatchila to begin with, they saw they only had so much, and they right away divided into 8 little packets, and they put one in each day, right? Or the first day they filled the whole thing up to the top. And then miraculously, it only burned down 1/8 every day. So you get the difference there?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So they either put 1/8 in, right, or they put it all in, and only 1/8 went down.
It doesn't change the quality of the miracle. It's just the nature of how the miracle unfolded.
These two opinions? What are you talking about?
Yeah, these opinions.
Wait, which one? We have 4 opinions now. We have 2 and 2. You're talking about the second 2 or the different?
Well, you're saying quantitatively and qualitatively.
All right, so yeah, it does change the nature of the miracle. It's a different miracle, right? Either there was more oil, or there was supernatural oil, right? I mean, supernaturally strong oil. All right, lefizeh According to this, Yotze L'chor, it comes out seemingly, Sha'abirur, im Nes Chanukah dom l'Nes HaNeros shel Sarah v'Rivka toloi b'shtei ofanim elu. So if we want to actually, we were trying to find out before, if you remember, what was unique about the Chanukah menorah miracle, over and above a miracle of this same exact breed that happened long ago that caused us to make Hanukkah into a holiday, whereas there we did not. So basically now we can say that the clarification of the miracle of Hanukkah, whether it's and its comparison to the candles of Sarah and Rivka, it depends on these two different conditions, right? Be'atem la'ofen hasheni, shnei anisim hem misug echad, tosefes eichutis b'yecholas ha'ava shel hashemen. Right? He says, if it's in accordance with the second way, right, then the two miracles, they really are of one type of breed, which is essentially an additional quality, echus, in the ability of the oil to burn longer, right? B'shnei hamirakim dalak haner harbe yoser zman maharagil. Hamikrim. In both of these instances, b'shnei hamikrim, right, then the oil burned longer than it should have, right? Hahavdol b'neihem hu, what's the difference between them? Is that b'Chanukah haisa tosefes gedol yoser. That in Chanukah it was a little bit longer of a supercharged oil. Shmona yamim, it was 8 days. And Chanukah haya nes nifrad kol yom, sheyad liku es menorah kol yom. And there's another difference, if you want to say this was the miracle, that Hanukkah would have had a special individual miracle each day, right? So I had liku es menorah kol yom, because in Sarah's time, they only lit once, and it just lasted for a long time, right? Whereas in the Hanukkah menorah case, they lit it every day. So it was like that miracle sort of kept reoccurring 8 times. Whereas when it came to Sarah and Rivka, they did it basically. All the days were in one shot. So it was the miracle only basically happened once.
It was just sustaining versus reoccurring.
Right. So this is according to, again, just real quick to sum that up. If we're going to say that the miracle was in the quality of the oil, right? So these two miracles are basically the same. Only difference is that the quality of was an 8-day quality versus a 7-day quality, and the quality miracle sort of reoccurred 8 times as opposed to just happening one time, right? Because every time they lit it, they had to hope again that, oh, well, here we go again. The oil's only burning 1/8 away. L'umazos. Alternatively, Lefi Hezber Arishon, according to the first explanation, which was what? Which is that the quantity of the oil was the miracle. The miracle was in the realm of quantity. Hayanes Chanukah Mesug Acher. Then the miracle of the Chanukah was in a completely different category, right? B'neis Nivra Od Shemin. V'zeh lo ha b'neir Sarah v'Rivka. That in this miracle of Chanukah, if we want to explain it the first way that it's brought down to the base Yosef, is that more and more oil came out. Then it comes out that this actually was in fact different than the miracle of Sarah and Rivka, and maybe we found our man. In other words, that's what we were trying to figure out. Why was this made a holiday out of, and that was not? So if you want to say that it was just qualitatively. The miracles were both on a qualitative level, then there's not much difference between them, right? Just a little bit, maybe one happened every day, one happened only once, one happened a little bit longer, but those are sort of like minor differences. They're not, right? But if you want to say that in the miracle of Hanukkah, the oil increased, and in theirs, the oil was a different quality, then we've sort of found a unique difference in Hanukkah's miracle versus theirs, right? Ach, gam lefi hezber zeh, he says, okay, unfortunately, that's not going to work for us either. Because even if you want to say that we've now defined Chanukah as being a miracle in the amount, as differentiated from the increase in the quality of Sarah and Rivka, sorry, it's still not a Chiddush. It's still not really a novel miracle when it comes to Chanukah's miracle. Because there's another miracle in the Tanakh, which refers to a miraculously increasing oil, right? In a different area. Who remembers that story? Let's see if you get this one.
Was it Alicia?
It was Elisha. Remember the story of Elisha? The story was that Elisha like sort of took a liking to this family. They would help them out, make him a place to stay. So he like sort of owed them one. And this woman was having a hard time paying her bills, and the guy was going to come and take all her possessions. So he said, gather all your vessels that you have in the house. And she had basically
clay pots, right?
Clay pots, and she had a jar of oil. And he said, bring as many vessels as you can, and just keep on pouring. And as many vessels as you bring, this little jar of oil that you have will continue to fill all those vessels. So that she wound up with from one jar of oil, she wound up with a whole house filled with clay pots filled with oil. She was able to sell them, make all her money back, and there was a miracle called increasing oil, right? So even if you want to differentiate Chanuka now from Sarah and Rivka and say that it was a miracle of increased oil, that's also not a chiddush. In other words, it's not. We didn't make a holiday out of that one either, right? And so why are you going to make a holiday out of Chanuka? Because you found a new way that the miracle happened? No, it's not new. It's not worthy of a miracle. And that was called the Nes Asuch Shemen Shel Elisha. That was called the pouring of the oil in the times of Elisha, right? So Hanukkah is a copycat no matter how you look at it, right? If you want to say it's qualitatively the miracle, then it's like Sarah and Rivka. If you want to say it's quantitatively, it's like Elisha. Gimel.
I'm stumped.
It's a stumper. So he says, Hakashim al Shnei Hasberim. So now we're going to undo each of these svaras, each of the ideas that we just had regarding Hanukkah. Right? Why? We're going to say that neither of those two miracles actually work if you want to try and describe what the miracle of Hanukkah was. There's a difficulty if you want to say it's quantity or quality when it comes to Hanukkah. Not in the other two miracles. We're now basically establishing that Sarah's was quality and Elisha's was quantity. So we don't have a problem with that. But if you try to give either of those two explanations for Hanukkah, you will have a problem. It can't be either of them. Whoa. If you want to say that we're going with the quantity of oil was greater, you do Ashela. It's a known question, right? He brings it here in the Kli Chemda, and he brings a few different mafarshim that challenge this interpretation, because they say Keitzad Efshar Hayad Ladlik as a Nerz Mikdash b'Shemen Mekor b'Neis. How is it possible that you can light the menorah in the temple with oil whose source was from a miracle? Bahari Kasuv, doesn't it say in the Torah, Shemen Zayis Zach Kasis Lamar Lalos Ner Tamid? There's clear description of the quality of oil that you have to use in order to light the oil in the menorah. And it's called olive oil in order to light the candle. It doesn't say miracle oil, right? So if you have, it's nice that you have miracle oil. It's very commendable that you've got some miracle oil there, Hashem. I'll use it for other things. But I can't use it for the menorah because you told me I have to get oil that comes from an olive.
Why couldn't it be miraculous olive oil?
Bring the olive then. If you want to make an olive tree grow and all of a sudden that the oil is going to come pouring out of an olive, then yeah, we'll use it for the menorah. But if you just produced oil from thin air, that's not called olive oil. It's not oil from an olive. This is Mefarshim are asking this. So in other words, to say that there was a miraculous increase in the oil gets you in trouble with the laws of the Beis HaMikdash. Hashem. And therefore, if you want to nonetheless say that that's what the miracle meant, no, it's not a joke. Now we're going to define terms. If you want to say, sorry, on the contrary, this miracle was increased oil and it was miracle oil, then what you have to do is go back to your original verse where it says olive oil and say, it doesn't really mean olive oil. It means something which looks like olive oil. Right? It's clear and mamash smells and tastes like olive oil, but it's not. When Hashem said olive oil, he didn't mean it. One way or the other. Either he meant olive oil and this is disqualified, or he didn't really mean olive oil, and then you have to go reinterpret everything, in which case that could have other connotations. Maybe I'll just make it in a lab. and it just looks really like olive oil. It doesn't have to be from an olive. Who said? Right? So it's not a small thing to play with. And that's kind of a forced answer all of a sudden to say that it doesn't have to be real olive oil. So it kind of puts pressure that it probably wasn't, the miracle of Hanukkah was not a miraculous increase in the amount of oil, because it would stop it from being olive oil being burned.
Canola.
10W30.
V'lefi hesber shel shinoya eichus. Okay, so we kind of upshlug the amount conversation. What about the quality conversation? If you want to say, therefore, then, all right, you're pushing me into a corner here. I have to say that the miracle was the change in the quality of oil, right? That every night only an eighth burned. We also have a kasha. Can anyone think of it? That's not going to work for us either if we explain the miracle like that.
Because the Cohen is supposed to reset up the.
He's supposed to clean the menorah.
Yeah,
It's part of the Seder.
Set the menorah up every.
He cleans 2 candles and he cleans 5 candles.
Right.
Right.
Well,
He goes out, right?
if you're going to say that's a problem, then it's also a problem with the first one. According to one opinion of the first opinion,
Well,
they came in every day and they found the oil already filled.
Right, so they couldn't
Right.
clean it.
no, but if it was in there was one part of the first opinion where it was
Still in
One
charge.
part, I'm saying, but according to the second part of the
second part
first
is the
opinion, you have a
problem.
problem
Right.
also, right? But the idea of cleaning the menorah seemingly is actually only, and I'm getting this from the Gemara of Shabbos. It says that cleaning the menorah was not necessarily a mitzvah that had to be done at all in all times, because there was something called the Ner Maravi in the menorah itself in the temple, right? There's a question. It says, why does Hashem have a menorah in there? Was it dark? Like, does Hashem need light? And if he does, it's in a terrible place. It's like it's not shining anywhere and giving anybody light, because it's like deep inside the room that it's not shining light into the temple.
No,
So he says
none of those windows that projected out were in there.
Again, no. I mean, if they were, so it's it dark for Hashem? He can't see. He needs a, like, in other words, it's a funny thing that Hashem decides, like, one of the big mitzvahs is like, light it up. It's dark in here. So he says, no, it's not for light. Hashem doesn't need light. Why did he make us light a menorah? And it's actually true about all the different elements in the Kodesh, is that they were there to show a miracle. And the miracle of the menorah was that there was something called the Western candle, the Ner Maravi, which never went out. We learned this together, right? It never went out. There's different opinions which candle it was, but they lit it, and when they came back and found it, it was still lit. And so it says, well, hold on a second. And then it said they would extinguish it and light it again. So then one of the commentaries, or I think it's the Gemara itself, says, well, hold on a second. Isn't there a mitzvah to clean the candles? It says, no, that's only in times when there's not a Ner Maravi. In other words, then you have to like empty it out, clean it out. But if the oil's in there, just light it up again. So that's kind of like a conditional, because there was an era when the miracle stopped happening. I forgot that part, right? There was an era when we no longer merited that miracle to happen. Then we had to go clean out all of the candles. It was suspended
It was
in
like,
the second temple.
How long
In the
did this
second
miracle
temple.
last for?
The whole duration of the first temple.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah,
Like 400 years or something.
410.
one of the 10.
All right, so in any case, going back to our story, why are we saying that there's a difficulty if you want to describe the miracle as a change in the quality, right? That it went down only an eighth every night, or they put an eighth in every day. Here, it's not because of cleaning, it's because of this. Halacha legabi menorah kovas ten la midasa shitei dolekes me'erev ad boker v'shiru chachamim chetzi lo. It says the halacha is that you have to put a certain amount of oil in the chamber, in the candelabra, right? And it has to be a certain measure that's going to enable it to light from evening till morning, right? So they would light it like sort of before Shkia, and it had to stay lit all the way through the night until morning. And they said, well, there's different nights. There's the winter nights and the summer nights. How do we know how much oil to put in? So they said, we want to give a same amount of oil all throughout the year. We're not going to change the amount. And the sages established it has to be half a log of shemen, because that's going to be enough for the long winter nights of Tevis, right? And so every night you have to put a half a log, every day, when you put the oil in, you had to put in a certain amount in. It was a halacha that a certain amount of oil had to be put in, right? So in other words, you couldn't put in less. It was considered to be invalidating the lighting. B'nosov halacha shekli sharis tzrich lios malei. Kamuvan mina halacha shekli sharis ein makadshin ela malein. And there's another combined compound issue with what we just said. Why is it that they had to put in a half a log and not like sort of change it from season to season? Because there's a concept that whenever you're going to use one of the implements in the temple, it has to be full. So whatever they determine full is, so for example, instead of, there's certain things you had to bring 3/4, certain things you had to bring a half, certain things you had to bring, 1/4, whether it be for wine libations or oil libations or flour. So instead of having just a couple pots lying around, they had each measurement a pot in its own. So they had a pot which was a half a log, they had a pot which was a quarter log, they had a pot which is a half a hin, revi sahin, right? Because why? Because you're not, since the temple, you can't have half full implements in the temple. It's like mamish, like you wouldn't even have in the house of a rich person, let alone God's house. Every pot had to be filled to the top. So if you only needed a quarter, so give me a quarter pot. Don't give me a half a pot and fill it halfway, right? And so the same is true. Once they establish that full means a half a log of oil, you're not allowed to fill. It has to be full. And we learn this from the rule that you cannot sanctify an implement in the temple unless it's full. What does it mean sanctify? The first time any implement in the temple is used, it has to be used in its proper way, which means it has to be used full. So we learn from there, and then it gains holiness. And then you can't use it for your own private matters. This is like a different law. Let's say someone bought a cup for the temple, and they didn't use it for the temple yet, right? They just sort of made one, and they had it in mind it would be used for the temple. As soon as it's used for the temple, then it's a big sin if you use it for your own private matters.
You can't go down in holiness.
You can't go down in holiness. Once it's like Hashem's, it's actually it's a vera called me'ilah. You have to bring a carbon, and it's a balagan, right? So when is it considered to be used for the temple, right? When it was sanctified for the temple, and that's when it was used properly, and that's when it was used full, right? So if it wasn't really used full, it wasn't sanctified. It wasn't part of the temple stuff. So you see from here all these cases that it's a pretty bad explanation of the miracle if we're going to have to say that they only filled it a quarter of the way, an eighth of the way, or night 2, right? When they had the oil in there, they only had 7/8 full. Very, very hard to say that they were what were they busy doing? They were running across the world to get pure olive oil to do the mitzvah just right. And meanwhile, every night, except for the first night, they were totally doing it wrong according to halacha. It's like a weak answer for the miracle, right? Nothing's working for us here. Gesundheit. According to what we said just now, it comes out that if you want to define the miracle as a qualitative strength, then it went down 1/8 every night. They did not fulfill this mitzvah of giving it its proper measure. And the candelabra was not full as it needs to be.
Can't be.
Right? Even according to the second possibility that we gave, right? It comes out that each one of the days, except for the 8th day, that there was not enough oil that it could light from evening to morning. In other words, El Biyom Rishon has a menorah Malaya Pi Shmone Min Nachutz, Biyom Sheni Pi Sheva, V'chin Hala. Right? It comes out also that there's another issue. If you want to say that remember we said there's 2 ways of looking at the second miracle as well. Yeah. The quality miracle. One was they filled it up all one time in the beginning and it went down slowly, right? Another one was that they divided into 8. In fact, the first one was that they divided into 8, right? And then the second one was that they they filled it up slowly. So that's the first one, dividing into 8, is where we say that they didn't fill it whole, right? But the second one is that when it went down slowly throughout the, like at first it went down an eighth and it went down 2/8 and so forth. There's another issue, which is that it didn't have enough oil the second, except for the last night, to light from morning until evening. It had too much, right? Because you have to have the right amount of oil to light from evening till morning. Yeah, the first night it had enough to last 8 days. Evening, morning, evening, morning, evening, morning. The only time they would have fulfilled that criteria of having enough oil to last from evening till morning would have been the last day when it only had an eighth. Because since you're dealing with super concentrated, powerful oil, that was actually the right amount of oil. It was still not full.
Half a log.
It was no. So you're still in a situation where it wasn't full. You're still not. You're in trouble with that no matter what. But there's another thing which you have to put the right amount in to burn the right amount of time. And the only time they would have fulfilled that was the last day. So
And
the whole,
it was full as the first day.
Right.
So the whole
So it
middle
knocks
is-
out both the ideas.
yeah. So we're nowhere fast, my friends.
I thought we were in process of elimination here.
Well, we've eliminated both options. That's the problem.
I thought it was
Right? We had at first we were trying to figure out what was unique about Hanukkah. Then we found 2 ways it could be unique, and then we found, okay, those are both unique,
But not.
and you could explain each of them, but neither of them would actually have worked for the actual temple lighting, right? And I think this is a good place for us to stop,
Of course it is.
in suspense, just where I like us.
So it was option 2A.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right, guys.
Well, wait. So there's a third option then.
What could it be?